Are you ready to get casual? Grab your favorite adult beverage or combustible plant and join us for our roundtable TTRPG discussion. Oh yeah, it's time for Casual Friday. And now, here are your hosts.
I'm ready to get casual. Are you? Hey, what's up there? Wait. Oh my goodness. Oh, that was weird. I had us open in another browser window. I'm sorry. There were two of us for a second. Hey, everybody. We're going to pretend that didn't happen. Everybody, I'm GM Jim, and that over there is... Oh, that way.
I'm Ryan Doyle, and I was pretty sure that was a bit.
I absolutely thought that was a bit, and I'm Brad Wolf from Diarden.
Sorry, everyone. It was an accidental bit, I guess. If you found hilarity in that, then that's free.
Yeah,
That
Ryan and I were playing along. We're like, "Ooh, what are we looking for?" we were yes-anding.
Yeah. Today on Casual Friday, it's a very special episode of Casual Friday because we have some really, really big news. Hey there, Twin Steel. Welcome to the show. Some news that's been breaking for the last couple of days. Most of it came out yesterday, but there were some whispers that started on Wednesday of this week. About March 18th, 19th is when we started hearing about this. What's up, party people? Okay, Twin Steel, no pressure. Yeah, so apparently Project Sigil, Project Sigil, as I prefer to call it, is dead and dying. When we first started hearing about this a few days ago, the first, let's go ahead and put this screen up here for a second. This, Project Sigil, it looks cool, doesn't it? I mean, just looking at it, you think it looks pretty cool, Project Steven, says Twin Steel. So the word first started coming in when Andy Collins, who is a senior writer-designer at Wizards of the Coast, said that 30 developers, 90% of the team were laid off from Project Sigil at Wizards of the Coast, including yours truly. And apparently 3 people from that team have stayed to continue to fold the features over into maps. So we've got quite a lot to cover here. But you guys, Ryan and Brad, you got some initial impressions?
I was surprised that this was I thought this was their baby. I thought this was like the new direction of D&D, right? Like we've seen it in so many promo videos, like featured prominently, not just like teaser, but like prominently featured in their promo videos as much as the new edition has been featured in their promo videos.
Yeah, some other things that we learned via an article on Rascal News, but more so via Ted, because I don't pay for Rascal News, so I couldn't get behind the paywall. But Ted from Nerd Immersion very fortunately read the article, one of his videos. So we learned that Hasbro was considering it more like a 3D toy simulator when it was first designed, and at that time they were pouring buckets and buckets of money into it, but the project scope got narrower and narrower over time. And so from Rascal News, they had a screenshot of an internal memo, and there was one quote from it. From the memo said, quote, "After several months of alpha testing, we've concluded our aspirations for Sigil as a larger, standalone game with direct monetization path will not be realized." And so it's going to just get rolled into the master tier subscription, whatever parts of it are completed. There was some, when it was released, Andy Collins referred to it as a public beta, but they're not calling it a public beta anymore. It's just, this is what it is what you get. And they're apparently, the 3 people who are staying there are going to be working on developing, adding 3D stuff into maps, which maps is pretty good and maps works. We're going to talk more about the maps and VTT teams in just a minute. So apparently things started to go really wrong when they did the 2024 Gen Con tech demo with Brennan Lee Mulligan and Neil Brennan. Neil Brennan is the comedian. No, who's the guy who plays Astarion? I don't know. Whatever his name is. There was a few people from Baldur's Gate who were there, and then so after this bad tech demo, apparently Chris Cox got involved because he'd been hands off before that. He got involved and he didn't like the project, and apparently that's when it started to die off, when it was not getting support from Chris Cox. According to some... Oh.
No.
No. I got it. Yeah, I saw that. Okay, so apparently, according to some other anonymous employees who spoke to Rascal, and also confirmed, I was just talking to Indestructo Boy a little while ago in a Discord, and he's confirmed some of this because he has insiders at WotC too. It was believed that they actually canceled it a few months ago. Which then it seems to me that that fact is kind of reinforced by it's never gotten a name. You know, if they had actually completed it and released it, we wouldn't be calling it Project Sigil. That was its development name. You know, it would be called something like D&D World Beyond or D&D Infinite, D&D Expansive. They would have a much more marketing name for it than Project Sigil, which is kind of an obscure word to anyone who's not a D&D aficionado.
Above and Beyond, I think, would have been the right title. Since
Because 3D. See?
I like it, Brad.
They need to get you in there.
Yeah, maybe if you'd been talking to the team, then maybe if they'd had some logos, they would have had the vision. So the really juicy stuff apparently came from the fact that the Sigil team was largely cut off from the book team. They didn't have contact with the people who were writing the books, and apparently, and this is wild, the Sigil team didn't know that maps existed until they stumbled on it one day on the D&D Beyond website.
Yeah, they were like the rest of us, apparently.
Yeah, they had they had no idea it was coming. One of the designers logged into it thinking that it was Sigil, but then he logged into maps. And there was another quote from an employee that said, quote, Hasbro treated Sigil like a video game instead of a VTT and at no point cared to understand the difference. They were expecting big dollars. They were expecting to turn it into a video game to make Transformers, My Little Pony RPG makers, basically. And they were looking for like Magic the Gathering and Baldur's Gate 3 numbers.
Yeah, that surprised me. Like, why were they thinking they were going to get Baldur's Gate 3 kind of money or Magic the Gathering kind of money out of, an online VTT? Like, that didn't make sense.
Yeah, there was another thing in the article where it said that the designers kind of felt like they were performing miracles, but it was never quite good enough for Hasbro because there was a very large disconnect between what Hasbro thought the designers were making and what the designers were actually making.
Yeah, I feel like the designers were like, hey, cool, look at how you can play D&D this way, and look at how you can play D&D this way. And Hasbro's like, is it printing money yet?
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's something from a different article on GeekWire that I find really interesting. This is from January, and they said, Wizards quietly tested Project Sigil out at a recent PAX Unplugged conference where it learned that the more it attempted to use Sigil to automate D&D, the less people seemed to like it. That influenced an evolution of the tool from a sort of virtual D&D companion into an easy-to-use 3D map builder. And I find this really telling. This was from a couple months ago. This was probably around the time that Hasbro and Wizards were figuring out that this thing wasn't going to work. But I completely agree with this sentiment about the more you attempt to automate D&D, the less people seem to like it. I've talked before on this podcast about playing on VTTs, and I like Owlbear and maps because they're the most simple ones. And when I played on Foundry, when the DM said, all right, everyone roll initiative, then he clicked a button and a flurry of dice went across the screen. And then we were all just checked in initiative. And I was like, wait, what happened? And then I was like, initiative is the most annoying part of combat, because right when it should be high tension, you have to slow down and do a bunch of math and organization. But I want to feel like I had a hand in it. Mm. And so that's how I feel about the automating D&D, that some VTTs do, and why I think people understand. Like we want to roll the dice, we want to do the math.
I found
do you
this
guys
part
think?
very validating to me, because when we did that demo and I almost melted my computer, I was like, wow, this is really cool. I kind of hate it. And like, I thought I was the minority there. I felt like pretty like old man, get off my lawn, kids. Like, this is how D&D is going to be played in the future. And I'm just going to be like the game shop's the nursing home. Can't tell the difference. But yeah, it seems like most people are in my camp of like, it's a great VTT, it's a bad video game, and you've gotten pretty close to the line of video game, and I'll just go play a video game if that's what I want. I'm playing D&D because I explicitly want the stuff that a video game isn't doing, from my experience.
The thing that really blows my mind is how there was animosity and a lack of communication between the D&D Beyond team and the Sigil team, because we were from the jump, we were promised seamless immersion, right? Mm-hmm. And then I remember at one of the early demos, they talked about importing your D&D Beyond character into Sigil. They said nothing about exporting. They said nothing about them talking back and forth to each other. They just talked about importing, and which would be wild if you were truly expected to not be able to seamlessly have them move back, if it were really two different products.
It's clearly, the problem's clearly up top, and that's been true every stupid news story that we cover on this show. It's like people on the ground doing the best they can to make an awesome thing. They don't have the tools at their disposal to communicate to the other team, let alone know that they exist in the first place. So that's not great. And then someone from on high comes down and says, oh, I thought you were making Baldur's Gate 3 and this was going to be $1 million project. I don't see that. I'm going to cancel this. It's not even done yet. Like, I think they could have really... I was afraid of this thing, honestly. I was afraid of this chewing up the market for other VTTs, which I like. I'm a little nervous about Hasbro's consolidation of the industry in any way. So, like, in some sense, I should be happy that this is happening, but I'm just so tired of watching this company step on rakes and hit themselves in the face. Like, come on.
Full on Sideshow Bob.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just so weird. Like, and I feel like they have like the worst case of ADHD, because they're like, let's buy a movie studio and make movies and television. Oh no, sell that. Oh, video games. Oh, VTT. Ooh. What's next? No, VTT. Oh, Netflix. Let's do Netflix. and like, what's gonna happen next?
It's just a bunch of squirrels in that boardroom.
Yeah.
I've told these guys before, but it feels to me, Wizards of the Coast just feels to me like that friend that you keep wanting them to straighten up and fly right, and they keep screwing up, and you're just like, come on, WotC, you really need to get it together. And then for a while, they seem to be doing well, and they even do some kind of outreach, and they make friends and make positive strides. And then the next thing you know, they're calling you from jail because they got arrested stripping copper wire out of an abandoned house. And you're like, damn it, WotC, how many times are you going to do this? So quit stealing the copper wire and just get a job, WotC. That's all we're saying.
Oh. Do you guys remember, I can't think of the name of the company, but there was an investment company that like published this article. They wanted WotC to separate from Hasbro. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
It was back like right around peak D&D, like right before, or maybe it was even during the pandemic. And they were like, you should, as investors in Hasbro, we want you to separate WotC out and make it its own company, so we get a stock split, and then we have two companies that are both doing well, right? And at that point, it seemed like Hasbro got really bothered or overly invested in WotC, and since then it's been like just downhill.
Yes. I blame them for making Hasbro realize that they owned WotC in the first place. Because that's where all this trouble started.
Yeah. Yep. Well, and it was shortly after that that WotC came out with the D&D is under monetized. And it's like, oh, it's like this investment firm drew attention to WotC, and then Hasbro took that personal, like, oh, we've got a cash cow, let's squeeze as much money out of this as we can, and in the process, choke the cow to death.
Yeah. So we were just discussing this at the beginning of the conversation, was that before it was released, they were calling it an open beta, but now they're not using that term anymore because they're essentially saying that it hasn't actually been canceled. What they have delivered a product. Their product was an alpha kind of product, and when I worked in software, this is pretty common where they say we have to get this thing, we have to make this product. Stage 1 is MVP, the minimum viable product. We'll get that out, and then we'll be able to go back and add in all the features we want. And invariably what happens is they put out the MVP of some bare bones thing, and then the development team gets pulled in a completely different direction, and the full 2.0 version never happens, which is what sounds like what happened here, pretty much. They're putting out a bare bones thing. The extra product, there's no money for it anymore because the Hasbro just realizes we're not going to get a My Little Pony RPG generator where people can do microtransactions for My Little Ponies and Transformer skins or whatever.
But it just shows that was kind of my assumption at first because there was one LinkedIn post and one questionable source being like, Sigil's over. And I was like, no, Sigil's over. The development phase is over. They fire everybody because that's corporate talk. And now a couple people are going to build out the modules for Sigil and build out the mini skins and the dice and all the microtransactions. This is just what happens when a product gets released. And it turns out that was an improper prediction. They canceled this months ago because they didn't. The people up top don't even know what the people on the ground are doing. Someone expected Baldur's Gate 3. Someone expected a video game to come out of this thing, doesn't know what a VTT is. Because, I thought this would be a cash cow. Again, I was afraid of the success of this thing. People were going to spend good money on virtual minis and virtual dice. And, I, who don't love, I don't know, handing them money or running things online, do run some things online, and would have maybe in the future bought 3D maps of modules I was running. I don't know if I would spend hours tinkering with that thing, but you sell me Lost Mine of Fandel, or you sell me Castle Ravenloft ready to rock, prefigured. But yeah, I might be interested in that, and I'm not even your target audience anymore. So it seems like they're walking away from a lot of money by doing this.
Yeah, I think they're walking away from good money, right? But they wanted it to be insane money, right? They wanted it to be they literally said they were thinking it was going to be like Baldur's Gate 3 or Magic the Gathering, that this was going to be this huge moneymaker. And I don't think our hobby's just not there yet. We're just not big enough yet.
Yeah. So let's do some analysis here. What do we think are the good and the bad things that are going to come out of this, out of Sigil, quote unquote, failing? The good and the bad.
Well, I don't know if this is good or bad, or probably both. I think it's another death knell of WotC. It's one more thing for people to hate about WotC. We talked about a couple of shows ago how that's the cool thing to do. Hating WotC is the cool thing to do now. So I feel like this just adds to that pile. And what that means, though, could be both good or bad, right? It could mean that that's great for independent developers to get games like Nimble and Vagabond and all that sort of stuff out. We saw Shadow Dark blow up with another Kickstarter, so maybe that's good for the industry.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of people. a lot of voices in the next few weeks that are going to say, "Hey, WotC, you know that thing that we didn't want and that we talked trash about before it got here? We're mad you didn't deliver it."
It really makes my take sound so weird. It's like, this is good, I'm afraid. Like, that's not more reasonable. But like,
Well,
there's like the right amount of inadequacy coming from WotC that I personally want to see for like the good of the hobby, the good of the industry. Like, we don't want the 5,000-pound gorilla grabbing airplanes out of the sky from the top of the Empire State Building to be the only game in town. But if that thing dies and falls, it's not going to be a net positive. Like, all of this stupid stuff sucks so much air out of the room. It feels like it's like this is the conversation in the TTRPG space. Who knows, for the next couple of weeks now, maybe. Like, I don't know if this helps the brand new thing in the moment. I do think it probably saves a lot of VTT space out there. I think Roll20 benefits from this immensely. I think Foundry, Owlbear Rodeo, pick your favorite, Tailspire, you know, the ones that are more even closer to Sigil. I think they're going to be benefiting from this in the long run. But I want WotC to like putter along quietly, please. Just shush.
I think historically, at least the generic narrative of this, right? Like 5 years from now, we'll be able to do videos on this and like, no, this is what really happened. But I think the generic narrative that's going to be taken away from this is that 5.5 is just a rinse and repeat of 4th edition, right? Mm-hmm. They made it too gamified. A lot of people didn't like it. A lot of people turned away. They promised a VTT, which they did in 4th edition, and couldn't deliver. And 4th edition had its like ridiculously strict gaming license that nobody wanted to use. 5.5 had the OGL debacle. Like, it looks very similar, but I mean, very different circumstances, right? But the generic narrative, I think, is going to be, 5.5 is just like 4E.
I think the a good that has come out of this is that we have one less thing to worry about, that D&D is going to become a complete walled garden. Because if this had been very successful, we could foresee a future where they stop renewing their licenses with Roll20 and with Foundry. If Sigil was popular enough, they could have successfully pulled off the walled garden. And from that angle, Roll20, those other companies, they don't have to worry about Sigil anymore. That they can take that off their strategy board. But now maybe those companies do need to worry about maps. Mm-hmm. Because Sigil was the big VTT killer, it was supposed to have all the bells and whistles, etc. But that's flopping, and meanwhile, maps keeps getting better and better and better. So I always thought it was strange that they were putting out maps when Sigil was so heavily marketed, and they never had a good answer for that. We were always like, why are they doing this? They seem to be iterating, and they seem to have a sizable team working on maps because it's got new features. It's got a pretty detailed roadmap. Meanwhile, Sigil is the future. Why are they even doing this maps thing? But so with the other thing, with the good and the bad, I think the bad that's going to come out of this, most likely within Hasbro and within WotC, is that this thing failed because of upper management inadequacy. But do you think upper management is going to suffer because of it? No. That those sins will get passed down to the people at Wizards of the Coast. And generally what happens when something fails and the company screws up is that they're just asked to do more with less in the future. Mm-hmm. More people will lose their jobs than just these 30 people, these 30 designers. And they'll just be asked to do more and more work with fewer resources until something pops eventually.
Yeah, we got a question here about maps. You've messed around with maps more than I have, Jim. But the answer here is yes, right? It's very much like Owlbear Rodeo, right?
Yeah, it's the closest is to Owlbear Rodeo. It's not as full featured as Foundry or Roll20, but it's getting there. For about 2 years now, they've reliably put out lots and lots of new features, and it works, and it has really good integration. If you're in the D&D Beyond ecosystem, it's really good to pull up stat blocks, character sheets, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, this was my question, and kind of where I was going with that joke earlier about Hasbro having the worst case of ADHD. Like they've got when the was he the producer director, somebody from both Deadpool and Stranger Things working on the Netflix show. And you think they landed him and figured, no, this is our cash cow now, and just pivoted and just threw all the money in that direction?
Netflix as a brand is known for their follow through and seeing projects to completion. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Womp womp. Yeah, we don't know. But we here at the Landlocked Warlocks are going to be watching this situation closely. Meanwhile, let's move on to some other things, because this is not the only thing that's happening in the world, even though it feels like it. So next up, we are going to talk about a little Kickstarter called The Hedge Maze of the Crescent Queen. And one of us knows a lot about this, and the others don't. So, Brad, do you want to take it away?
Yeah, I got an invite to play test this adventure. Oh gosh, a month or so ago, and it was really fun. It was a really cool adventure, and this is not like some grand, far-reaching like the WotC hardback adventures that you're going to start and then the group's going to fall apart. You're never going to be able to finish. It's a detailed and comprehensive adventure, but it's relatively short. It's definitely something you could complete in probably like 5 or 6 sessions, I think, from what the designer told me. And it was really fun to play. We had a blast playing it. I played it with Riker from Cleric Corner, and we just had a really good time.
Nice. Yeah, this is Hedge Mage of the Crescent Queen. It's on Kickstarter. It looks like it hasn't launched yet.
It launches Monday, the first crescent moon of spring.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Well,
I like that.
nice.
Yeah, so it definitely has the Fey Wild theme and lots of weird, interesting characters, and both fantastical, fun characters and dark and creepy characters. It was fun to play.
Cool. All right. Well, that was quick and easy. So coming up next, if you guys remember, a couple weeks ago, we were talking about Mouse Ritter and Mouse Guard, and we weren't quite sure the difference between the two. Well, I did some research, and so I want to debut a new segment on the show called Jim Explains the Difference Between Mouse Guard and Mouse Ritter. All right.
Love it.
That segment is beginning right now. Okay, so Mouse Ritter is more, it's kind of like rules light. It's kind of like OSR with mice. It's focused on exploration, gear, loot. It's the one with the tile slot inventory management system where you actually put tiles for inventory things on your character sheet. But Mouse Guard is based on an existing graphic novel series, so it has attached lore to it, and it's mechanically it's based on Burning Wheel, so it's a lot more crunchy. It's crunchy, has specific gameplay loop, and it's more about travel adventure, like Lord of the Rings kind of stuff. And this was a quote that I saw about it. Quote, "The horror of being at the bottom of the food chain." So this has been Jim Explains the Difference Between Mouse Guard and Mouse Ritter. It's a new segment on the show. I don't know if it'll come back. I guess it depends on how good I did that time explaining the difference. But I'll keep the graphic just in case.
I may need a refresher pretty soon because something is wrong with my brain. There's too many mouse themes. I read Redwall as a child. Watership Down is bouncing around in there. I'm going to need you to say that again soon. So we'll get use out of that graphic.
There's also the Fantasy Mouse board game as well.
What is that?
Oh, I can't. I can't remember. I can't keep the name straight.
Well, Root. Root is the
No.
thing.
Root's
Root is
newer. I'm
Okay.
thinking of an older board game.
All right, so moving on. Hey, you out there watching this, are you subscribed to the Landlocked Warlocks? Are you sure? You might think you are, but you might not be. If you're not, you should be. Go smash that like button and hit the subscribe, and then every time we put something out, you need to like that too. That's all part of the deal. Hey, so coming up soon, in fact, 1 week from today, we are going to be debuting the Mimic Cafe right after the show. Next week, we'll do our show at the regular time, and then right after, we're going to be debuting this one-shot actual play using a very simple RPG system that we might be talking about here again in a few minutes. So that's next week, Mimic Cafe. I'm super excited for it. I had a lot of fun editing that video.
It's Mice and Mystics. That's the board game I was thinking of.
Mousetrap.
Mice and Mystics. It's actually a miniatures board game, so it has that RPG feel to it.
Mice and Mystics.
Yeah.
Mousetrap is the one with like the Rube Goldberg kind of.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, right.
Yeah, I think that came out when I was like 3.
I remember seeing commercials for that game. I do remember that. So we talked about Mimic Cafe. So the next thing I wanted to mention is that going on right now until April 5th, if you're into the Dragonlance novels, there's a Humble bundle going on with them, where you can get all 26 books for $18, 7 for 10, 3 for 1. But I mean, it's Humble bundle. You can pay whatever you want, regardless of how many you get. But it does include the original 3, Twilight, Winter Night. Wait, or Winter Night, Spring Dawning? But yeah, they are. That's the original 3.
So, fun story. I was traveling around the country. We would visit used bookstores, and I I got all the Dritz novels in order pretty fast, and I started buying these up, but it took me a long time to get number 1. So I had like 4 or 5 of these untouched in the backseat of my car. Finally got my hands on, I think Autumn Twilight is the first one. Got it, read it, and I was like, oh, I don't really care for this at all. And spent like months on a quest to like gather these, and I read like half of the second one. I was like, this one's not for me.
I loved the Chronicles trilogy when I was a kid. I've been tempted to go back to it and reread it, but I talked myself out of it because I don't want to spoil it for myself, because I remember it well, and I don't want to go back and tell my 13-year-old self he was wrong. But this trilogy transformed the way we played D&D back in like 1985, 86. By the time my friends and I had all read this trilogy, the first Dragonlance trilogy, and we shifted from the classic dungeon crawl to like the epic hero quest in our style of play. And that actually led us to play a lot more, because once we were more story focused, we wanted to continue the story. So we actually played D&D more regularly and more often when we shifted to that play style of the epic hero quest.
Huh. I prefer R.A. Salvatore, but I did like the Chronicles trilogy. I like Drizzt. I like Crystal Shard. Anyway, so if you want to get all the Dragonlance novels, and Twin Steel, they are EPUBs, which you can open on pretty much any device. But yeah, I assume they have DRM built in, most likely. All right, we are cooking. So the next thing we want to talk about is something that I know very little about, but there is a new book on D&D called Obojima, Tales from the Tall Grass.
I think it's pronounced Obojima.
That would be the American way to pronounce it, Brad. God. Pronounce it. Real Japanese, the pronunciation, they don't go up on the second syllable like Americans do.
Oh, okay.
They don't say Yakuza, they say Yakuza.
Interesting.
They don't say tempura chicken, they say tempura chicken. Anyway, there you go. was my sneaky cultural observation. For the day. I just got back from Barcelona, and let me tell you.
I hear Ibiza's beautiful this time of year. This looks dope. There seems to be a wave, and by wave I mean like 2 or 3 that have recently come on my radar of like more cozy, exploration-based, but like crunchier games. And I like that. I want that to exist in the world. I'm not sure I'm going to convince my group to explore this world for a very long time, or 2 that I want to, but I think I do for a session or 2. But I like this happening. I like a world where it's like, this world is interesting, even if you don't have to kill everybody. Because it feels like there's going to be tools in there that make worlds interesting, even if we are in a combat-focused game.
Yeah, it seemed like I haven't done a deep dive on it, but it seemed like it has some interesting additional mechanics. Like they talk about a potion making system and crafting system. So I'm curious to check it out. I was just excited to see another third-party product being brought into D&D Beyond. Of course, that leads us back to our conversation about the potential of D&D Beyond becoming a walled garden. Like right now, it's really cool to see all these independent developers getting their content published on D&D Beyond. And right now, it seems like that's been very lucrative for them. But what happens if that walled garden thing happens, and then you have to go through D&D Beyond to get your D&D content out there? So that's 2 sides of that conversation that we were having earlier, right?
I think maybe we should be maybe I should be, just for my own mental health, like resting in gratitude that WotC is failing to enact this master plan. I'm just tired of them trying to be evil and bumbling at the same time. But I do have a lot of pride in like these smaller third-party publishers like making it big. Like it's an awesome opportunity for these guys. There's some cool stuff in there. Hey, do you like Rangers and Princess Mononoke? Check this out. They literally made, I just totally spaced on his name, but like there's a cursed ranger who's like slowly being corrupted, and it's giving them more powers, but they're slowly dying at the same time. That risk reward mechanic that I always love. It's cool subclasses in there. The barbarian uses the potion system, but in their stomach. They just eat the ingredients. They don't have to brew anything. Like there's a lot of cool concepts in there.
That sounds really neat.
It kind of sounds like the Brandon Sanderson Mistborn trilogy magic system, where they perform magic by consuming raw ingredients and cooking them inside their bodies to create the magic.
Burn metals? Yeah.
Burning alloys. Yeah. Brandon Sanderson, good magic systems in his books, very logical. He spends a lot of time thinking about the mechanics of how his magic systems work. No surprise that guy made some TTRPGs.
Yeah, he should really make a game out of that.
He should turn that into a game. Brad, you got anything you want to talk about? You got anything to shill?
Well,
tell us about that hat you're wearing.
Oh yeah, I got my new Diarden hat. This is a prototype. I'm kicking around the idea of some merch, so who knows what we got going on.
Anything else? What, you got a video coming out this weekend?
The video that's coming out, it should be out on Monday. I'm trying to time it with the Kickstarter for Crescent Queen, because there's an ad in my video for Crescent Queen. But it's I'm looking in again, diving into the new monster manual, and I'm talking about hags. So
Cool.
So on brand with the Kickstarter, like the whole Fae theme. And that's what I've been working on. Most of my energy over the past week has been reorganizing my game room and setting up my new microphone and adding new lights and trying to look more professional, sound more professional.
Cool.
I have a question. How much of that video is about you yelling about gender issues now that hags can be boys too?
0%.
Oh, come on.
Oh,
I don't know. I'm not finished editing. I could always add in there just to have a screechy thumbnail, right? Like,
yeah. Your thumbnail is you going like this, like no, and it says hags can be boys now in Terrabang and Terrabang. There you
Is
go.
it just me? I may have said this already too, but the male hag looks like Billy Crystal to me. It looks like Miracle Max to me.
now that you say that, I see it. Yes.
So I love it. Like, I don't know how I would have. I'm pretty gender inclusive in general. I'm a pretty open minded guy, but like, I love me some Billy Crystal. So let's go. I'm fully on board.
I'm trying to find this picture of Billy Crystal.
He's only mostly dead. I say that like probably 33% of the games I run, if someone drops to 0, I'm gonna say that once a night probably.
Nice. So moving on to our main roundtable discussion. So me and the boys, we're not officially ready to announce anything yet, but we've been working on our own little tater pig. And designing tater pigs is an interesting process. And so we wanted to talk about, how do you know when it's done? How do you decide between rules and rulings? How do you decide between adding a rule for clarification or taking a rule away for simplicity? Where do you choose between brevity and clarity? And one of the reasons that we're talking about this is because we've been designing and talking about one-page RPGs, because we're all part of a cartel called the One-Page One-Shot Club. Did I say cartel? I meant legitimate business. And when you're designing a one-page RPG, the parameters are pretty well laid out for you on the tin, right? If you can't fit it on the page, it's not part of the one-page RPG. If it spills over into a second page, it's not a one-page RPG anymore. So from that, when you're designing a one-page RPG, it's pretty easy to know when you can flourish and add in other extraneous or optional rules versus keeping things as simple as possible. So we put up a little poll, and not a poll, but a post, and it's funny. Pretty much the question of how do you know when you're done, everyone says you don't know. Done, never. But what do you guys think about this?
I mean, from a historical perspective, like when I was playing AD&D, getting into second edition, as a kid coming up, I wanted more. I want more crunch. I want more design. I want answers to my questions, and then we got that in third edition. And like when I opened up third edition, I was like, it's here. This is the version of D&D I've always wanted. This is great. And after playing it, I was like, no, this is like too weighty, and we don't play enough because everybody's busy mapping out their character for 16 levels before we actually play level 1. And it like we got everything we wanted. Like from my perspective, I got everything I wanted when third edition came out, and then I didn't love it. So I think there's definitely a balance between like how much do you design your game, how thoroughly do you design your game, and I think it comes back to what we were talking about a couple of shows ago with Mike Merles, was talking about the essence of the game. Like, you don't want to over design to where you get away from that essence. What is fun at the table? He pointed that out with advantage and disadvantage, right? Like, he said, advantage disadvantage is not the best math. There's better ways to, make the math more balanced than advantage and disadvantage. But advantage and disadvantage just really works, and it's very fun at the table. And I think that statement that he made in one of those recent videos he did kind of encapsulates this conversation. It's like there's a sweet spot in there somewhere. I don't know exactly how to define that sweet spot, but I think that's definitely a conversation worth having when you're working on your game.
Yes, I think Jim's. You said it before. MVP, like minimum viable products. You get to that point. Okay, this is a game. This is working. This is a functional. This is enough to adjudicate a game here. And then I think you have to interrogate every choice on top of that. Like, why is this there? Why is this there? Why is this there? Because like unless you're confined to a single page, the bloat happens very quickly and very naturally, and you have to really be laser focused on like why exactly are you putting this even on the page, right? Like just even like word count, especially if you're limited to one page. Like why are you saying why use many words when few words good? And then you have to do the opposite process and like remove your eyeball from the magnifying glass that you've been staring at this thing and try to approach it as if you had never seen it before, which is incredibly challenging. But like there comes a point where you have to be like, what is this going to look like to someone when I hand it to them and don't have an hour to explain the rules to them, or they're going to watch the 15-minute primer video that I make about it. Like, if I give them this, what is the questions that are going to arise? What are they going to misunderstand? What are the barriers to entry? How can I make reading this hopefully fun, or at least easy enough to get out of the way of them having fun with the thing I made?
You know, I was reading some, speaking of design, I was reading some criticism of 5e advantage and disadvantage, and I agree with Brad that it works, it keeps things simple. I was reading a criticism of 5e D&D saying that it's over-reliant on advantage and disadvantage. And I thought, this person probably never played like 4e. You know, and got a +2 from this, a +1 from this, a +3 from this, a -2 from this, a -1 from this, and a +4 from this, and then had to add all that up. Because that's what it used to be like, kids.
Back in my day.
That's what it used to be like. And advantage, disadvantage, is D&D over-reliant on advantage, disadvantage? Probably. But yeah, you have to make those decisions between crunch and ease of use and accessibility. For me, the line between a rules light and a rules medium or rules heavy game is, does it have jump mechanics?
Ooh.
If it has rules about jumping, then it's a very specific kind of game. But if the rule about jumping is roll a d6 and we'll see how well you do, that's below the poverty line of complication in TTRPGs.
So where does grappling fit in? Like, is grappling above or below jump mechanics?
I guess it depends if it's a combat focused game or not. I don't know. I don't have a treatise written on this. I'm not prepared to defend my thesis.
What if there are jump mechanics, but no one uses them and they just call for an athletics check whenever it comes up?
Yeah. Yeah. So, you know, there is a perfect amount of crunch out there, and I don't know what it is, because I want a game that's easy to pick up and play, but complex enough that I can play it for a long time. You know, I love one pagers. I love one shots because it inspires. It's a different kind of play, and it's a kind of gameplay that I really enjoy. And so there's a certain point where adding a certain number of rules allows you to keep on going, because we couldn't play Roll for Shoes in a campaign.
Right.
You know, I mean, you could if it was, you were fine with like the same kind of level of stakes and the same level of conflict and the same level of abilities. But the reason you play the same character over and over again for a campaign is to watch that character grow, right?
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like the simple mechanics are great, like you're saying, for low level play, but then it becomes a matter of like, there's so many design choices, right? Like if you want your character to develop, is it a skill based game, right? Where you're adding skills and abilities, right? Or is it a level based game like D&D? Is it somewhere like kind of both, like 3.5, where it was level based game, but you also had this comprehensive skills and feat system? And then do you want it to be a roll under system or a roll over system, right? Where roll under can be a much faster game, but at the same time, there's a lot of people who just their brains are wired to roll high. High is good. So, so I can see arguments for roll under systems, why they're more efficient and more effective and have, faster resolution. But at the same time, it just kind of breaks my brain. No, I want to roll high, right? And then, dice pools, right? And then building dice pools. And then are you adding the dice in the dice pool? Or are you only using a certain score on the die, like only D6s? Twin Steel's saying some of this in the chat, right? There's so many choices to make in there. And then it's a matter of how realistic do we want to be? How much of a simulator do we want this game to be? And how much do we want to abstract, right? So if you're abstracting a lot of things, it sometimes feels like there's not enough nuance to the game. Combat's over in 3 rolls. Like that doesn't always feel good, But then if you dial in too much, now we're like, weapon speed and initiative modifiers, and no, your polearm takes much longer than this spell. So now, the wizard, or the spell takes much longer than stabbing somebody with a dagger. So we have this complicated weapon speed system to make the game more realistic. But is that more fun, right? There's all those questions that go into designing a game.
When a minute ago Ryan was mentioning 5e having, or hinting at 5e having jump mechanics that everyone just ignores, I wonder how, if you assume 5e is a balanced game, which we know it's not, but let's just say that 5e was a balanced game in combat. How many rules in 5e can you ignore before it is no longer balanced? I've never played at a 5e table that cared about encumbrance. I've played at several 5e tables, not all of them, but several 5e tables that didn't care about spell components, even ones with a material cost. Like, what can you hand wave or simplify or house rule or skip and still maintain the same fairness of gameplay loop,
I mean, if we're talking like 2014, right? Just the 2014 Player's Handbook, I think you can make a pretty good argument that the game is pretty well balanced. Monk, get over there. You're not part of this conversation. Besides the Monk, 2014 is a pretty well designed game, and you can ignore encumbrance, and you definitely don't want to start with a first level feat. So I think that is actually a pretty good sweet spot for a game. And I think we all know that because we played the hell out of that game. I think we all played that for several years, or at least a few years before we started tinkering with things and, adding Xanathars and making up house rules and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
That's my thought.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly valid. There was inevitably power creep happens, and it happens on the player side, not necessarily the dungeon master side. So then because the dungeon master is going to make up their own stuff anyway. But yeah, 5e is eminently playable. Like, say what you want about it. It tries to be all things to all people, and that's the main criticism of it. But wow, did that work? Did that get a lot of people to play the game and then explore other games? I think it's about knowing what the game is to start, right? Like, it would be very hard to make 5e exists already. You don't have the decades of legacy to support it, so you're out there not trying to make a game for everybody, for all seasons, for all preferences. You want to know exactly how crunchy this game is that you're making. What are you focused on? What are you willing to hand wave? At what cost? But like, if your game is 80% rules about combat, and then 10% rules about socializing, and 10% rules about exploration, then like you made a game about combat. I hope you did it on purpose, and don't pretend that you didn't.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but hasn't every edition of D&D been mostly combat?
Yeah.
I mean,
And that's why
I know we romanticize the like early editions of D&D, and we kind of romanticize this idea that they were more dungeon delving and more exploration. And yes, some people played that way, but I don't think it was the majority. I mean, it's hard to tell because there was no internet back then, right? But I think the whole OSR, while it's cool, love the OSR. I'm not like throwing shade on you folks. The There's this romanticized idea that old school D&D was this specific thing that I don't think it really was. I think there's plenty of evidence, like zine and articles. Matt Colville has dived into some of those that really shows that there was a lot of different ways to play D&D, even back in like the late 70s. They were still trying to figure this game out, and everybody had their own way of playing. And
Yeah, I've been well, I stopped subscribing, but for a long time I was a subscriber to the service where this guy, Chris Korsak something, RPG bookseller, his website is rpgrpgrpg.com, I think, where this guy just has a treasure trove of classic TTRPG magazines and books and stuff. So it's a service you can go sign up and get some delivered. So for a while I was getting old issues of Dungeon and Dragon magazine. I have some from like the 80s even. And it's very enlightening to read articles about role-playing back then, because we don't think of D&D in the 80s as being really narrative, but it'd surprise you to read about some of the ways that people were role-playing and, even doing their 4D stuff back then. No, I don't. 4D is a dirty word. I don't like saying it out loud.
I mean, like I said earlier, when we were talking about Dragonlance, we definitely shifted from a dungeon crawling style of play to a narrative style of play after reading that Dragonlance trilogy. And a friend of mine went away to college. He went to Arizona, and he came back, and he's like, "Oh my God, people out there play D&D so differently." Because we were like very much into like the heroic adventures and playing into high levels and long like campaign driven stories, and he encountered a group that was very much just, I mean, he said they might as well have been playing board games. Like it was like all they did was go into the dungeon and fight. They min-maxed their characters and they fought. That's all they did. And both of those styles of play, we were, that was like 80s, right? Early 90s. And and those styles of play are not what the OSR describes old school style being, right? So there were definitely multiple styles of play from the 70s through the 90s. There wasn't one cohesive, and I still don't think there's a cohesive style of D&D.
No, and I think that's something to keep in mind when you're making something for 5e or something else entirely. You walked out, you go into the grocery store, get me a bag of chips, that there's 100 flavors for now. The people's tastes are different. People are looking for different things. Some people like ridges. Some people like more crunch. Some people don't want any crunch. Some people don't want potato chips in the first place. So this idea that there's like one way to rule them all is always a trap. Is always incorrect and gets you into some really dark places pretty fast on the internet, at least.
Yeah, in terms of practical advice, when you're designing for 5e, it's really important to keep in mind, because we've all made modules and expansions and rules, homebrew things for 5e for ourselves, and believe we've all published some of them too. And the really important thing to remember, it's very tempting. 5e, you want to design for 5e because it's the most popular system out there, right? And so you want to design something that people are going to use. also being one of the more complex systems out there, if you design something for 5e like a potion making system or a monster cooking subsystem or something like that, you just got to remember that 5e is already complex. So the more stuff you add on top of it, the more you're asking someone to reserve brain space for something they might not like or might only use once. If it's like a monster hunting dungeon delve, and we've got these mechanics specifically for finding, defeating, and cooking monsters. And if it's a complex system, people are a lot less likely to use it. And that's one reason I'm excited for Daggerheart is I want to design systems for a game that has crunch, narrative, but fewer rules overall. I'm excited that Daggerheart has 2 damage types. It's so much easier to design for than the 13 that are in 5e.
Yeah, that's a good point. Nacho, I agree with some things he's saying here. Yes, Dragonlance introduced the railroad style campaign. The actual Dragonlance modules were terribly railroady. But the novels were what inspired us to have these epic campaigns. But then he says his problem with running 5e is switching his brain from combat to roleplay, switching in and out. And I definitely feel that. Like my role playing in combat definitely increased when I started playing 5e versus 3.5. Like 3.5, like I thought I enjoyed the crunch, but it wasn't really until I started playing OSR games like Swords and Wizardry and started playing 5e that I was like, wait a second, I'm role playing my villains more in combat than I ever have playing 3.5, and I really like that. But I still don't do it as much as I want. I want that overlap where I role play in combat. Like I'm not just numbers brain during combat and creative brain during role play. So that's for me is why I'm kind of like looking for tinkering with ideas to look for something a little less crunchy than 5e. I want a little more crunch than Shadow Dark, a little less than 5e. I haven't found the sweet spot yet.
I think Twin still said it pretty well here. The more you keep the extent systems in mind when designing for a game, the less you ask the players to learn. Yes.
You only have so much processing power.
Right.
And if you're spending it on math, yeah. If you're using it on new math, you're not, you're literally pulling calories away from the side of your brain that makes story happen, and vice versa.
Right. So you think we're done with our roundtable discussion? Have we made it all the way around the table?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of have like a segue into game designing stuff.
Please.
I put a game on the internet this week. Twin Steel made Gym Rats for a rat-based game jam over at Desks and Dorks, and I was like, he built a little engine that just keeps adding dice to a dice pool. And I was like, this is the most ridiculous thing. Like, a person with a giant bag of dice is going to love this. You made dice goblins. And he's like, yes, this should be dice goblins. And so I made dice goblins with him. I'm going to try to put it on the screen without destroying the delicate balance.
I don't need to share anymore. That's fine.
Oh, that's your delicate balance. Hold, please.
Talk amongst yourselves.
The concept just sounds fun, right? Like the one thing that I like about your idea here, Ryan, is that you're combining the flavor of the game with the mechanics of the game. And that's one thing we didn't talk about just now when we were talking about game design. That the whole idea of goblins, fits perfectly with this idea of like ridiculous dice pools. Like thematically and mechanically, those go very well together.
I put a lot of discuss. I put a lot of effort in the Dungeon Master's chair, let alone a game design hat on. I spend a lot of effort trying to make the players kind of forget that they're playing with the game. If they're paying more attention to the dice and the character sheet and like the tools that make the game happen, I'm failing to immerse them in the story of the game. So this process was incredibly freeing because it's the exact opposite of that. The idea is like dice is everything. Dice is your ability score, your level. The more dice you have, the more efficacy you have. And if you run out of dice, you're dead. So dice are also your hit points. And I've played it a few times. It's definitely better in person with physical dice. We played it on a VCT, and it was fun, but way harder to keep track of what the hell was happening. And the secret agenda here is if you win a round, now you're the king. Now you have to set the rules for the next round. So I'm tricking all of my players into secretly spending 5 to 10 minutes being a dungeon master, which feels pretty good. One of my players who's very smart and has never run a game before was like, I'm afraid to win. I was like, yes, you are. And he won, and it was great. And, you have to adjudicate things, and I've left a little bit of room. Like, I've tried to make things as clear as possible while some things have to be clarified. The players have to decide at the table how certain things work. And the king also gets to make one house rule. And there are suggestions, but you can also, you can change the game as you're playing it, and then instantly see the results of that, most of which are chaotic and disastrous, as fits a bunch of goblins. And then the game ends before it totally shakes itself apart, in theory.
Just so to answer this question right here, can you do serious games with one-page rules, or do they favor fun and zany games? They definitely trend toward the latter. But you can do a serious game. I would say that one-pagers really just favor narrative-type games. Because they require more rulings than rules. You've only got a page of rules. You're asking the GM, you're asking the players to contribute to the narrative, and you're asking the GM to make decisions when things are unclear. So, we've got those two things in mind. You can tell any kind of story you want.
Yeah, well, and I think we have examples of that, right? Like on this channel, right? The Lasers and Feelings, I think, had some. I mean, it was kind of zany at times, but it was all there was also some decent narrative and themes there. Sexy Battle Wizards, even though it's clearly with a name like Sexy Battle Wizards, it's designed to be goofy, but we had some dark themes going with that adventure. So I think you could. I think it's all about how you want to approach it. I've definitely run rules light games. Like I kind of tweaked Professor Dungeon Master's Eldritch Hack rules, and I use those for Halloween one-shots. And those are more serious and they're darker. But I think what's great about one-page rules is the system really gets out of the way, right? So you can kind of do whatever you want with it as long as everybody at the table is in the same mindset.
Right, like next week after the show, we're going to be debuting Mimic Cafe. And Mimic Cafe it's a 5e adventure. But when I ran it, we used a homebrew system based on Roll for Shoes by Ben Ray. Because I wanted it to be fast. I wanted it to be really narrative. I wanted these guys to take control of the story and push it where they wanted to go rather than worrying about initiative and hit points and armor class. We just got rid of all that stuff. We still played the same adventure, but we just did it in a more kind of communal storytelling fun way with fewer dice to get in the way of the story.
And there's something very instructive about focusing in on one part of the game, at least for a short-term experiment, to run a straight up 5th level D&D 5e adventure in a different system really shows you the code beneath the matrix, and also what particular systems are good at or bad at. What did we lose by doing this? What did we gain by doing this? How can I take those lessons into everything I run going forward? Every game I play going forward is better because I played other games in the past. Even if I hate what I discover, it's like, okay, I don't like that. I know to lean the other way now.
Yeah, that Seagulls game we played was ridiculous. It was hilarious and ridiculous.
The levels of pathos. I'm sorry, it was insane. It was.
But the mechanics, like that whole idea that the seagulls were the hit points, that's still rattling around in my brain. Like that's a mechanic I want to use somewhere. Like, could you use that mechanic for like a level 0 D&D setup game, right? Where you have like a bunch of villagers and you're whittling down the villagers, and the last 4 are going to be the characters you play once this campaign kicks off, right? Like use that seagull mechanic to do something like that. I think that would be fun.
There was a version of Dice Goblins where your dice were the goblins, but it was so it was like tribes of goblins fighting each other. But I like it better just like you're one guy.
So Nacho mentions here his players are going to Neverwinter and adding a casino. I love casinos in 5e. It's super easy to run them. Let me tell you a couple of my favorite games. Slots are really easy to do. You just roll 5d6. If they get doubles, they get their money back. Triples, they get 5 times. They get 4, they get 100 times. And if they get all 5, the same number, they get 1,000 gold or whatever. And blackjack is really easy to run if you're in person. You roll 1d10 in the open and then 1d10 under your cupped hand, and then you just hit based on that. Those are two that I always include. Do you guys have any other easy to run gambling games?
I don't know.
Well, there you go, Nacho. Slots, real easy to do. Just have them roll 5 or 6 d6 and award out money, and then blackjack's a little harder to do on a VTT because you can't really hide one of the dice. But if you're in person, it's really good. One hidden, one open, then you can just hit as you go around, just like regular blackjack.
And if you're in a casino, only the dealer needs to hide one of the d10s. So if you're the GM, you can like roll
True.
1d10 in front of you.
True. So guys, we are at 72 minutes in. Do we want to call it here or dive into the if there's time section? I think maybe we should call it.
Oh, we should definitely call it. There's no way. There's no time.
There's no time.
I'm afraid we are not going to get into our main topic of discussing Chapter 2 of the Dungeon Master's Guide from 2024. We will definitely do better next week and make time so that we can get to that. Also, next week, we're going to continue to cover the decline of Western civilization in the form of Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast. So that will probably be one of our main topics again. There you go. Mike says, craps, just roll 2d6 for a target number.
Yeah.
Yeah. Craps is when you roll a number and then you try to roll that same number again, right? Without going...
7 or 11.
Without 7 or 11, and double ones is bad too, right?
I think so. It's been years since I played craps.
They call that snake eyes, and it doesn't sound like snake eyes would be a good thing. Snake eyes sounds like a bad thing.
It's always a dragon on my... I roll 2d6 encounter tables for like regions, and Snake Eyes is almost always dragon. It's definitely never good. It's pretty much always dragon.
Twin Steel's very upset that we're not getting into the DMG Chapter 2. I'm really sorry. Really sorry, guys. We talked about it for a good hour before the show about everything we were going to cover in the DMG 2, and we're just not... we just didn't get to it today. Anyway, so next week we're going to do the show, and then after we'll be premiering the Mimic Cafe, and most or all of us will be there in chat. But today, after the show, go do whatever you want. I have to go to the dentist, which I'm not very excited about, but that's my reality. And any parting words, guys?
I'm feeling good that I'm not going to the dentist, so sorry, Jim.
You should be.
I'm going to the dentist next week, so
It comes for us all.
Yep.
All right, everyone. Thank you for watching, and we will see you again soon. Goodbye.